Okay, as promised, here are the sneaky reasons why your back hurts. This is the top reason, really, that I came up with, and through training people for so long on their back pain, is you're not moving your hips enough. You're not moving your hips enough when you walk. You're not moving your hips enough when you sit. Your mobility, you might have the mobility to move your hips. I'm not saying you don't have limited hip mobility. You just don't use them as much as you should. So you can even try this out. Try to bring the front of your hips forward. Bring the front of your hips backwards. Front of your hips forward. Front of your hips backwards. You should have a lot of range in there. And if you don't, that's okay. That's something you could totally work on. Let me move this. It's smoke outside of my house today, so I had to find a place to come and talk to you about this. So, when you walk, your hips should be moving forward, back, just like we just did. And a lot of times I see people walk stiffly with their backs, so their hips aren't moving and their back is doing all the work and it's gripping. Or they are going into the ground with their back. So their back is just carrying so much of the weight, and the hips aren't really there to do what their job is. So one fun way to make sure your hips are awake is to move them around, just like we did. Front, back, side, side, front, back. All that range you have, bring it around. So much range. And your body needs you to move your hips when you do stuff. So my favorite exercise to make sure to move your hips while you're walking, you're going to look like a penguin, but it's super fun. You're going to keep your legs straight. I'm going to lift my shirt up a little bit so you can see my hips. You're going to take one hip, bring it up. Walk forward. But my knees are straight. Legs are straight. Walk forward. So you don't even really need your feet and your legs to walk, right? You could use your hips. Walk forward. So try that out. Straight leg, walk, lift, hip. Straight leg, walk with a lift, hip. And you see how much work that takes for your hips to move. And see if your back doesn't really do much. And notice if you move your hips when you walk. Why don't we move our hips? Why is so many people not moving your hips? I have a theory. It's just a theory. In Western culture, Western society, we're taught not to move our hips. I remember being a little girl in church, and people would tell you to stop switching when you walk. Has anyone ever told you that? Stop switching when you walk. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. Your hips are supposed to switch when you walk. You're supposed to move your hips. And they would say that don't do that, especially in front of men and especially in front of white people. So that's just what they told us in church. And so that plus the fear I see when people are asked to move their hips, it's scary. Why? Because it's vulnerable. Because there's a lot of things, emotions trapped in the hip. Not trapped, but live in the hips. So it might be scary to move it. Maybe it's scary because your back does hurt and you're scared to move your hips because your back's going to hurt. But guess what? You need to move your hips to save your back. I know this for sure because one of my clients, actually a lot of my clients, but one of my clients in particular had this problem of back pain while jogging. And we look at her mechanics and we notice her hips were not moving. So we did this exercise, the penguin exercise, a lot. We did forwards, backwards, all around in circles. And then we started implementing that into her jogging form. And slowly but surely, she got the form down, maybe after a few weeks, and her back was not hurting anymore. Same with one of my clients who's an 85-year-old man complaining of back pain, but he loves to go on adventures. He loves to walk. But he's walking, his hips aren't moving. He's just here. You know, his back is doing everything instead of your hips. So we did the same thing. broke down those steps into penguin steps, applied that slowly to his walking gait, his walking style, his pattern. And next thing you know, he was able to walk a lot further without having to stop and rest because his back was not in pain. So, move your hips. And I know it might be scary, it might be awkward, it might be like, oh, people are looking at me move my hips. I've heard that one before too. I mean, they probably got back pain too. Tell them to move their hips too. I want to go deeper into this culture thing, why it's so important, and why I think that. I mean, just think about how this country was built. America, I'm in America. It was built like they saw these Africans moving their hips and they made it taboo. I mean, even dancing, twerking, for example, is a dance that is centuries old. They still do it in Africa. They don't call it twerking, but I mean, that's just how our hips move. When we dance, when we're celebrating, our hips just move that way. And it's demonized. So, or over-sexualized. So that act of moving the hips becomes, oh, I don't want to be seen as sexual. Oh, I don't want to be seen as this. Oh, I want to be accepted. Oh, I don't want to stand out too much. And I don't want to reveal myself through my hips. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. So, practice moving your hips in your own house by yourself. Throw on some music and let your hips fly. Don't worry about how it looks. Just worry about how it feels. Think about how it feels. Loosen it up. This is going to really help your back pain, and it's fun. So, that is my number one reason why your back hurts all the time, is because your hips aren't moving. Even when you're sitting, your hips require mobility so that your back is not taking all the pressure of the body sitting on it. So if this is your tailbone should be kind of sitting, resting. A lot of times when we sit, it's curled under. So you notice when you try to sit on the floor, maybe you kind of round your spine. If you sit on the chair, you round your spine. That's because your tailbone is being pulled under, and your tailbone is pulled under. It's going to pull everything else all the way from the neck, and you're going to cause this rounded position. Shoulders, chins down, all that stuff. That hunch, crunchy, hunchy look. So, that's another reason the hips are not moving enough while they're sitting, standing, walking. It's all in the hips. And European countries, especially like Eastern European countries, and America has the highest amount of back pain globally. We have the most. Western society has the most back pain. Yes, there are other countries, they have back pain and stuff like that. Yes, but a lot of that is influenced by us. I mean, chairs. Chairs were invented for rich people in Europe. Only rich people had chairs. And now it is a standard for us. Right? So just think about that concept of like our hips are kind of not needed at some point. Or not even not needed, but not wanted. They went over to Africa. They were like, oh, look at these heathens in their hips. Oh, let's not be like that. But let's really be like that. You know how it goes. Everybody want to be it until it's time to be it. So, yeah. But not you. You're a person. You are a person with hips. So, you need to move your hips. So, see what kind of range of motion you have in your hips. That's step one. Does it feel more comfortable when you pop it out? Does it feel more comfortable when you pop it in? Where does that lie? And how do you find the center? Right? That's another topic. I don't want to get off topic. Finding the center is going to help you with your back pain, especially while you're standing and like being still. But make sure you're using your hips more. That's gonna be the first step I would have anybody take to see how far they can move and how much they can move. And make sure you get up and move in between your sitting sessions. I'm not trying to tell you not to sit. I'm not one of those coaches who like, you need to stop sitting. What did I just say about the chair? Like, it's a staple now. So I'm not going to tell you to stop sitting. But you can take breaks. Especially breaks to walk around with your hips. Throw on some salsa. Move your hips. I don't know how to dance salsa. You don't have to. Just move your hips. Just shake them. See what happens. And you'll feel how much loose your back starts to feel. You don't feel this pressure on it because you've relieved it, because you're letting the hips take over. The hips are these big bones, you know. There's two of them on each side holding you together, making one. And then you got the sacrum in the middle. That's a lot of structure that needs to be used when you move. So why do our back hurt so often? Because we're not moving our hips enough. Because we live in a culture who tells us not to, and that it's not safe to. And it might be scary too. It makes it taboo. We live in a culture where chairs are a staple. Even when we drive, I've noticed it's really hard to find a car to sit properly in. And what do you mean sit properly? I mean have the right sitting posture, to not let your back work so hard, to let your back rest while you sit. And then there's ways to let your back get strong while you sit. Sitting can be an exercise. So I'm going to go more into detail into that during my master class coming up next month. So if you've been checking my stories, I've been asking you what I should title this master class. I'm still working on it. You gave me some really good feedback. Thank you. But at the end of the day, after this master class, you are going to know how to sit without back pain and even strengthen your spine while you're sitting. So it'd be a 2-for-1. You get your work done, you get your work out pain-free. Okay? So if you're interested in that, DM me right now. DM me. And then I'll get you on that list so that you'll be one of the first people to know about it when I drop it. It's going to be a great masterclass. It's going to be less than 1 hour. I'm going to break down how to have great sitting posture so that your hips have the right amount of mobility. And if your hips don't have, you feel like it's hard to even move your hips and hard to get that mobility that I'm talking about, then you'll have support around that too. Don't worry. But first we got to know what the heck, how do we do it? The first step is to move your hips more. You do this until I see you at the masterclass. You might have the mobility to be able to strengthen your spine and sit and get your work done. All right? Happy Wednesday.